do a track and trace.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it.
My sentiment is, yeah. Some people are. Do I know? Evan?
It's all on.
I'm messing with you.
Yeah.
So we're just waiting for Nash.
This is calling.
So just a couple more minutes. We're just waiting for Nash. He's on his way.
Yeah.
I've joined in. This is Janine Coleman.
This is Carmen. We haven't quite started. Oh, what? We're on mute? Are we on? Okay. We're going to start in 2 minutes. We're just waiting for Nash Gonzalez. I'll start with North. Morning, everyone. This is the OLA working group, and we'll start with Cassandra doing the roll call for us, so we know who's on the phone.
All right, good morning. Amanda Ryman. Alan Harris. Edna Gotcha. Ann Borges. Here. Bob Taylor.
Here.
Kate.
Yes.
Sean Simone Pietre. Gurr.
Here.
Lee Bailey. Devin Jones. Here. Ellen Drell. Emmy Sir. Edson. Frida Stud. Gail Johnson. Here. Dinman.
Here.
Nelson.
Jude Tillman. Oh.
Jen McCoskey.
Here.
And Jude Tillman, did I hear you just join?
Yes, I did. I didn't know if you could hear me.
Jude Herrera.
30 minutes late.
Karen. Kerpo. Linda Kelly. Ben Levin. Marvin Levin. Megan Headley. Marie. Nathan Boyer. Sellers. Paul Hansberry. Penelope Andrews.
Yeah.
Taylor.
Here.
Ron Edwards.
Present.
Sue Lottie.
Here.
Sue Tibbins. Lori Edwards. Here. Carson.
Here.
And we also have Supervisor Brown. Supervisor Cowan.
Here.
Carmel Angelo.
Here.
Janelle Rao. Here. Debbie Kett. Here. We also have Diana Atkins from Texas. And Ash Gonzalez just joined us. Yes. And is there anyone else on the call who I haven't identified yet?
Payne.
I'll call.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
But that's okay. We'll get there.
Okay. Anyone else on the phone call?
Cassandra? This is Paul Younker with Michael Baker National, and I believe that Mark Corcoran is also on the line with us.
Hi,
Thank
this is
you,
Mark
Paul.
Corcoran from Michael Baker.
Thank
My
you,
name
guys.
is Amy.
Yeah, my Amy Keck. I work with Patrick Sellers. Taking
Well, last name, Amy?
K-E-C.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone in the room who I didn't identify?
Get me?
Got you, Marion?
All right, well, thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Our last meeting of the working group was on November 3rd, and at that time, Paul Yunker, as our consultant, was introduced to the group. I have some notes to that meeting. There certainly were some questions. We had Nash and Mary here at that meeting. What we'd like to do today is pick up from where we left off, and also, Nash, if you could do a quick review of where we are with this, and I'd also like the group to hear from our consultant.
So, this is Nash, and as Carmel's indicated, we've had meetings with the consultants. We've had the consultant has been selected and up and running. We recently had a kickoff meeting among staff and the consultant just to lay things out. And so at this point, this is the beginning of actually working with the group itself so that we can go ahead and begin the process of exploring the different alternatives that the consultant is going to be looking at. When we previously met with the consultant, it was to look at providing guidance to the consultant as far as the various areas that need to be looked at, the exemptions, the language, and so on. So with that, I'd like Paul Yunker, if he's on the phone, to jump in.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Nice to have a chance to talk with the group. As mentioned, I think it was December 14th, we were able to visit with county staff and go over everything that we've heard from the initial RFP through the meeting when the Board of Supervisors approved our contract. We learned some about this process and the outcomes, and really were able to refine based on our meeting with staff. What was clearly stated at the outset of this was we're going to work on an exemption process, just as an overlay exemption for in the county where there's long-established cultivation, but under the current regulations that cultivation could not continue. Might be related to zoning or not compatible zoning. So that was the initial focus. We've gone further into this. There's a few other areas we've understood there's interest in exploring. I'm going to use shorthand here for the overlay exemption. I'm going to refer to that generally as opt-in. That would be places where people are not currently allowed to cultivate and they want to be able to opt in to do legal cultivation. We heard first really in detail the board contract meeting about opt-out. It relates to communities where cannabis cultivation is by right, but there's members of communities that are feeling negatively impacted by that cultivation. And those members of the community would like to explore essentially an opt-out provision, which may be really kind of similar in approach as the opt-in, but the opt-out would be the opposite. It would instead of granting an additional right, it would remove or limit the right to cultivate within these communities where there's a feeling that there's a negative or adverse impact occurring. So kind of the opt-in side and the opt-out side. In addition to those two areas, we also understand that there's provision in the code that may see a strong community benefit, but do create impediments for continued cultivation. An example, a really easy example would be if cultivation can only occur on parcels that are acres or larger, and we have a parcel that's 9.5 acres and surrounded by large parcels, is there any reason that we should exclude that parcel from cultivating, or do we maybe want to set a process by which an exception, so it being the term not exemption, but this would be an exception in planning terms, almost like something that we call a variance, but I want to be real clear, it's not a variance, it would be an exception. It would be specific conditions where the county says we're willing to forego these regulations that would otherwise restrict cannabis cultivation. So that's the exceptions side of things. And the third area the fourth area we're going to be working with the county is you all had enough time working with this ordinance, and I've written and lived with a lot of zoning codes and a lot of zoning regulations. Never perfect, and I think that you've probably been able to identify some areas where your procedures could be improved or could be clarified, could be more user-friendly. And so those are areas where we want to explore just how can we make this a more effective set of regulations in general. Not specifically to ease or make more restrictive, just to make them work a little bit better. So 4 areas that we understand we're going to be working with this group. We are interested in getting to a kickoff meeting with the working group. We're looking at the latter part of January. Could be the 19th, possibly the 24th and the 26th, the afternoon of the 19th, some on the 24th or sometime on the 26th. So before we get off this call, I think it'd be good if we could talk about whether those are good dates and whether we can get enough of the group together, understanding that no date's going to work for everybody, but would like to make sure as many people can participate as possible. We have also been mapping out the process for public involvement. My understanding is the direction we're going is the working group will be the primary sounding board for our efforts. We will also be going out and in person in any community where we're considering one of these overlay exemption zones. Understand that those communities, the likely candidates for cannabis overlay exemptions would be Laville, Colo, and probably some community in the we refer to as the inland coastal area, not directly in the coastal zone, but in proximate to the coastal zone, inland coastal area. And so go out to whatever is identified through this process to be our test cases for the overlay exemption zones, and we'll meet directly with community members there. There's also going to be opportunities at both planning and board meetings, and that would take the form of briefings and updates during the process, as well as adoption hearings, formal hearings that will occur before the commission and the board. Finally, we'll be building a website presence for all the working materials to allow people to access and be reviewing the work that's going on. Your county is pretty geographically spread out. We're hoping that most people interested in the process have access to the internet and will be able to participate that way. I think it'll make it easier on everybody. And we may be exploring some other avenues for accepting input and testing ideas through internet mechanisms. So that's really a high level overview of where I think we're at, and of course we're still really refining what this effort ultimately will include, and so I'm really interested in hearing what the group had offered today.
Okay, thank you. Paul, do you want Mark to talk as well?
Mark and I have been in pretty close contact. Mark, do you have anything to add there?
No, I don't. I do have, I hate to say, I do have one request. Someone's phone out there is given a lot of static on the online. If we could make sure everyone's muted if they're not speaking, because some of the stuff's a little bit difficult for me to hear.
And
Okay.
this is Jude. Carmel, very muffled. Are you far away from the microphone?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. So the question that Paul had regarding the people on the phone, if anybody is not muted, if you could do that if you're not talking, that would help for you to hear. So I think I'd like to open it up now, unless Nash, if there's anything else from you, I'd like to open it up to the people in the room to ask questions of the consultant. This is a toss-up between Hannah and Paul. Great. Why don't we do that suggestion?
Hi,
And Paul, whoever speaks, please speak loud enough where the people on the phone can hear. Thank you.
this is Paul Hansberry. I think that the exceptions piece is a really important thing to perhaps tackle first. The overlays is going to be contentious and could take a very long time, and I think there's an immediate need for the exceptions. The language seems to be a stumbling block, whether it's a variance or an exception or flexibility. Flexibility, I've heard, is a four-letter word. Could use, discretionary enforcement. No, I just made it up. No, it's a thing. But one of the things that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is that on a state level, the Department of Public Health is the only agency that has a mechanism for an appeal. It's simply one because you have to go, then be rejected, and then appeal it, but they do have that mechanism. I've been speaking with the people at the board, the Department of Public Health, and about expediting that. It would be done at the application level, vetted by the local authorities for their approval. So it would be sort of like a pre-appeal. So using common sense, as like Paul said, that no regulations are perfect. We want to try to get it right. And I see that these exceptions will be a perfect way to track where the holes are, where there's a need, by tracking what the exceptions are being asked for. And otherwise, we're still just in the dark and looking at what might happen as we have real people coming in looking for these exceptions. It'll help. Oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. It would be common sense exceptions that would be forth in the application. Yes, I'd love to be able to do 24, the rules say 24 hours for track and trace, but I don't have internet access, maybe it's 76 hours. Things like that then they can take that state with the application, and that could be reviewed and expedite that whole process, because it's a very varied county, as was pointed out, and different things. If you don't have internet access, I don't have electricity. There are a number of different reasons. There's a myriad of reasons. Supervisor Brown brought up one a few weeks ago at a meeting that there's an industrial thing over off Orange Springs Road that technically is too close to a child facility. But there's a cliff that separates them, and there needs to be some sort of, flexibility there. We've all been talking about, Supervisor Hamburg has said, well, yeah, there's this, but what about that? So there's a real need for it in the community, and there's a need to put something in place that can be used sooner than later, rather than waiting for the overlay. Thank you.
Just want to check with the consultants if there's any comments he'd like to Paul's comment or suggestions.
I view us working on this project is we're going to have several efforts underway simultaneously, and so I don't really see it as a linear. We'll do overlays and then we'll do exceptions. As we get into this process, we may see that some efforts are moving more quickly, and then we may at that point choose to move forward with some comments. I would caution that, take a set of code amendments to the board is a whole process that requires hearings and noticing and reports. And so if we I don't think we really have the ability to take this forward as 3 separate pieces of legislation. And so my goal would be to try to move quickly and do a good job and get this all in place relatively soon. If there's some relief in the form of exceptions needed sooner, we can explore whether there's a less formal process by which exceptions can be granted. But my experience is that when an agency is asked to approve something, approve an application, you either need to have the mechanism established for flexibility, or you need to adhere to your regulations. So finding that kind of middle ground for an interim solution, we're certainly willing to look at it. We would want to look to the legal staff as well for a little bit of guidance. But I think my first goal would be, let's just get working on all of these pieces and see how quickly we can move. And if we do find ourselves dealing with certain aspects, then let's consider at that point whether we want to feed with portions sooner ahead of the full batch. So a little bit of flexibility now while we kind of more about each of these areas would be appreciated.
Are we going to, okay, well, Paul, thank you. Do we want to just go around the room then? Do you want to do that?
Edwards, one of
Sorry, did you say phone?
Except the phone people, how will we be included if you go around the room just to check?
Well, you would be last. Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Ron Edwards.
No
Some of these things I think might be helpful would be to, the purpose of this is to encourage compliance. And a lot of people are looking at a timeline. We do have a 6-month period that the county is going to continue to take applications. So we really want to settle these exceptions in areas that, while people are paying fees, trying to get their state permits, kind of puts a little urgency on some of these issues. And I just wanted to bring that to the consultant's attention.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
I'm Anne Marie Borges. We were sent here because it's cheaper than bringing my land use attorney and my civil attorneys to these meetings. So they would ask us to come here and speak to the inaccuracies that have driven some of the actions taken against us that weren't based on fact. So that's why we're here.
Okay. All right, so I assume then you're planning on just listening. You don't have anything else you'd like to add right now?
I'm listening to what people have to say.
All right, okay.
Recording it.
Thank you, Anne Marie. These meetings are being recorded, and they are going on our website. You would have recording whether you record it or not. It's available to all members of the public. Right, thank you.
Ann and I are together, so that's, she's already spoken.
Okay, all right. Supervisor Brown, do you want us to wait and go to you at the end, or would you like to? Okay, all right. Well, let's go to the back then. Go ahead.
Ramirez, I would just like to get some sort of outline of maybe some of the things that we absolutely know cannot fly with the overlaying exceptions. People have a lot of questions about, does it only apply to sunset zones? Can it apply to a broader spectrum of our zoning ordinance? Like, you can get that answered quickly, because then that can move the process a lot quicker, I think, for people there that are looking to get involved and they need to know.
Paul, did you hear that?
It was a little bit difficult. If I could get a name, I'd appreciate it too. I didn't catch the name.
My name is Meek Ramirez, or Mo.
Mo Ramirez?
Basically, she's asking about getting a list of what can't work. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, you know, as we go through different concept options, different requests on this, that is there a list of topics or items that absolutely cannot be included, can't work? And I guess I would really look at Nash and our consultants on that one. And Nash, I know you just walked out, but that was Monique's question that she threw out, was, you know, getting a list of why bothers.
So I think part of the process is to shake out some of these, what issues would be why bothers is, as we're going through this review process. I mean, this is it's going to be, I'll call it process at the same time, and Paul, jump in any time, but as we start exploring what areas work, what areas don't work, we're going to come up with those areas that maybe, don't even bother going down this route. But I think this is why, Paul wants to start that engagement with the working group to get the feedback, to be able to see, okay, what direction do we need to go?
Okay, and one action we'll have to take before the end of this meeting is determining when these ongoing meetings will occur. And so we would need, Paul, we would need you and your calendar to be certain that we could match up the working group and your schedule. So we can do that before the end of this meeting. So,
I'm Will Carson.
Will, I think I'm going to ask you can either speak louder or move closer to the table. Thank you very much. We could move that. We could move that just over to him. Move it by.
I'm Will Carson.
Okay.
And comment on the simultaneous multi-pronged approach to solving these problems rather than a linear approach. I appreciate that. And I do not envision the opt-in, opt-out issue to be adversarial. I think that it's a matter of working things out. And so I don't think it's going to take as long as the state of the Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. And Sarah, do you have anything? Oh, good. Thank you, Devin.
Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. I guess the questions that I have for the consultant would be some of the legality questions behind how an overlay zoning would work, both for opt-in and opt-out. Secondary concern that we are looking at is how this could establish precedent that would impact future land uses in the future. Right now cannabis is quite the debated topic, but it could be something else in the future, like I don't like orange cats in the neighborhood, or I don't like, and what may be it. So I think this could establish precedent that could create impacts for future zoning. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll introduce myself. My name is Trevor Thomas. I'm here as a representative of Dragonfly and Jude Tillman.
Oh,
I'm here to listen.
all right, well, thank you. Do you want to say something? I do. You do? I do. And you want to say it right now? Go ahead.
Okay. This is Anna Nelson, and I want to echo a few of the comments that were made before and ask a few questions.
Good.
First off, I believe that, well, I'm all in favor of working on a multi-pronged approach simultaneously. I fear that as a pragmatic matter, the difference between not having the exceptions process, not the opt-in or opt-out, but the exceptions process figured and a process put in place soon, is that people will be out of business, period. Is an urgency about at the local and at the state level. In addition to our 6 months remaining on our ordinance, we also have a state law currently in effect which requires everybody to be licensed. Because many of these people are very small farmers, so for example, an exception of reduction in setback from 50 feet to 45 feet when your neighbor agrees and has no problem with it, it doesn't seem like it should take that much difficulty coming up with a method where discretionary review with standards that are in place, particularly where there are neighbor, if it's impacting a neighbor, the neighbors agree that we should be able to accomplish some of those quickly, and there is an incredible urgency about it because these businesses are small businesses and they cannot afford to wait to be legal. They have to get legal now. We will lose a lot of people. We're already losing a lot of people because of other issues. And while I am all for multitasking, I have to stress the urgency in those situations. And the same, I guess, could be said for those who are in areas where they previously were legal under the Mendocino County ordinance up until this past year, where they were allowed to grow 25 plants, and now they're in zoning that doesn't require it. It's the same thing. They're going to be shut out. With that said, I understand that that's a much lengthier determination of a process of how to design a fair and lawful opt-in or opt-out situation. I'm not sure how that will go. So with respect to what was said earlier about relief in the form of exceptions needed sooner, I would say strongly that yes, there is a need. Talking to what Paul Hansberry said and an appeal process or some other methodology, I'm not sure whether that would be the appropriate mechanism, but I do think that it is possible to craft some kind of review ancillary or corollary to variance type, and I understand that we don't want to use the term variance. The issue is that we're talking about amendments, and that brings up kind of a corollary issue, and that is at the board meeting a couple of times ago, it was requested by me and by some others that we have an amendments working group. And so I would ask a practical question. I don't think that it would be sensible to merge this group with an amendments group in general, but I do think that some kind of coordination where it's a subcommittee dealing with land use amendments versus all other types of amendments. So I just wanted to throw that out as a pragmatic matter. I have a question as to whether the consultants got our previously written materials from the working group. I think I remember Carmel saying that they did. Did they go?
I sent them to Mary Lynn, and it was my understanding she was going to be providing that to the consultant.
Can we get an answer about that? Paul, have any of us
been provided some materials from Mary Lynn, and possibly I have everything. We're still trying to confirm it. You folks have done a lot of good work, and we do want to make sure that we pick up everything that you've been able to pull together so far. So that will be something we'll be confirming before we get together for our kickoff meeting.
Well, I guess the reason why I'm asking that question is because I think that we really need to put some meat on these bones with respect to how we're going to move forward. We have a very large group, and I think on 5 working groups, and my experience is that the larger they are, unless we're highly organized and we volunteer to do work outside of the working group and bring that material to the group for review, that we won't be able to move in a quick and productive manner. And so I would request that as part of our discussion about dates and other things that we kind of tackle the issue of practical logistics of how we can be productive and still be inclusive. And that's all I have to say.
Hannah, you've raised a good question there, a couple of great questions about how we're going to participate. I did mention that, I think it makes sense as we go through this effort that we as a group get kind of basic improvements. But if you have another working group that's looking at kind of structural issues to your regulations and they're handling that already, then yeah, let's not duplicate efforts. So in response to that, let's make sure we're really focusing. We should be. I did come to realize in my visits to the county that you folks have so many efforts underway simultaneously, and they're also interrelated, that it is kind of important to say, this group has this charge and that group has that charge. Within our efforts, though, just referring to opt-in and opt-out, I don't want to exclude anybody from anything that they're interested in, but my sense is that the discussion of opt-out is fundamentally different than the discussion of opt-in. It may be that there's folks that really participate in one or the other of those, and I will agree with you that big groups move slower. So we will work with you as the stakeholders any way you want, but I have found that smaller focused working groups that can put together work products that can be reviewed by the larger group is an effective way to move more quickly through really complex questions. So I'll leave that out there, that we have not come to any conclusions about who's going to work on what, but we'd all be thinking about that. And if you're willing to let some of your peers rent you in certain focused areas, we'll probably be able to generate materials for everyone's review more quickly.
Casey Hill here. I think the county has done an excellent job threading the needle with allowing people to apply for licenses without having, with a permit that is in process locally. In a perfect world, we'll get this done prior to the June 30th deadline for local applications. Given the fact that oftentimes these things are not perfect world, it's going to be important to consider a possible amendment that would extend the permit deadline for locations that are expected to be in overlay zones if that process is not completed. So that's one of the things I'd like to put on the potential, is that over the next few months we need to define the places that are likely to end up in opt-in zones and places that want exceptions, and be able to give them a process to be moving forward if we're not able to get it done prior to June 30th.
So Paul, as our consultant, I hope you're taking a lot of notes. I think there's some really good comments, questions, and suggestions that have been made. I think probably, I like what everybody said, but I think basically what Casey said, and then going back to what Hannah said, I think this group could possibly pick a smaller group to actually get some work done and bring it back. And we did that with the state requirements, and it worked well. So, all right, shall we continue? We went to Hannah, and we stopped with the staff. You're going to pass? To the back.
Bob Taylor here.
Bob, if you could just speak a little louder, please.
Well, stand up, it's very hot, it actually...
I'm going to sit, but I can't speak louder. I would applaud the idea. We've got three basic, I think, very different groups here. I applaud the idea of separate committees to take care of some of these problems, where we're working in smaller groups and the rest of us don't look forward to this idea of dragging through the exemptions process, which for us really very little, to be honest with you. I love the idea that we break this into smaller committees and then move to particular issues of opt-in and opt-out that we're interested in.
Okay, thank you. Next. Supervisor McCowan, would you like to speak now or later? Just here to listen. All right, that's even before. I think we've left over here with Casey, so go ahead.
Okay, Valerie Edwards. I represent the Laytonville area that's looking to opt in for a zoning overlay. We've done already quite a bit of work in our area. I've gone door to door and actually talked to quite a number of the folks in our area, or at least, you know, as many as I could get to. I mean, a lot of people have fences, and so, but we've had 3 meetings. And we're talking about 200 plus parcels that have been already working together very well. Or at least, you know, whatever complaint there's been, apparently probably very small. And the people that have come to our meetings are very interested in opting in, and they also have concerns with the owner's, you know, requirements, because they are all small farmers, small farmers. And so, you know, whatever it is that we do, we could like just keep it simple as possible, and that, you know, people are very interested in opting in my area.
Yeah, Evan Johnson, and I is it Paul Zunker, the consultant, mentioned that that opt-in and opt-out are fundamentally different. I mean, I live in a residential neighborhood and we're trying to opt out from having the impacts of commercial anything, impacting the neighborhood. And so I would applaud that suggestion to maybe split out the opt-in, opt-out groups and to keep them separately for the time being. And I think the other issue is maybe downsizing group size and maybe having representatives reporting back. That's one option. So that could make this process more efficient, and everybody could get what they want when they need it. Which I hear you on that. So I think we are feeling as non-growers kind of overwhelmed by the massive growers that are at the table and deserve to be and have this economic interest at stake, and we don't. So we're hoping that there's going to be some equity in this process, and one of the ways to get equity might be to separate out the opt-in and opt-out groups. Paul, can you hear me? Is that...
Yep. For your comments, Evan.
Thank you.
Aaron Niederost with the Woody Glen Lane, Boonville Road community. I guess I just want to reiterate a couple of quick points, and then I will pass on the other points. But what Will said about being a non-adversarial process, I think it's a very important ground rule for all of us to understand and realize, and I appreciate that. And I was happy to hear, Paul, that you are tackling everything as sort of equal priority. I think that's important from our perspective as an opt-outer, for lack of a better term. We feel that there's also equal urgency due to negative and adverse impacts on neighborhoods that you mentioned earlier. So that would be number one. Number two, creating different processes, possibly different interest groups, and reducing the size of those interest groups for efficiency and time use. I again think that is very important. We can get a lot more done a lot quicker. And then one thing I wanted to mention that wasn't mentioned earlier is that you discussed doing visits to, I think it was Laytonville and an inland spot, and maybe Covelo. We also think it would be important for you to do site visits to, in particular, the Woody Glen Lane, Boonville Road, as well as the Deerwood group. And if there's any others, I don't know, but those two in particular have been the primary spots of interest. And then we will also wanted to I state for the record that we are ready to give a map and present ourselves as available and ready for the opt-out portion of this group. That was it.
Thank you. Sue? I just basically want to say that to confirm, these certain neighborhoods weren't necessarily for or against, not against cannabis. I'm part of the Woody Glen neighborhood. However, we are, not in favor of an area where it traditionally there has never been commercial growing in our neighborhood, and it has impacted the neighborhood. So I'm here just to support and listen and hope that I can help on either side of the fence. Great, thank you.
Hi. I'm Mary Ann Payne, and I am a resident in a neighborhood subdivision whose purpose the CCNR is defined as residential and recreational. And while, again, we have no problem with cannabis cultivation, it has definitely been changing the character of our neighborhood. So it raises a number of questions. Number one is, if there's a difference between local CCNRs and the county regs, who has precedence? And that probably is already an established issue according to counties. And if somebody has a clarification on that, I'd really like to know. And then we would like to be consulted because there is a large group of residents in that area that feel that there have been very negative impacts recently with both the increasing number and the scale of cannabis operations in our area. So we're interested in the opt-out or limiting cannabis cultivation.
Question on the...
Yeah.
Okay, so seeking a private no authority over them, the county does not enforce them. It would be up to the property owners to enforce them. Enforce them through.
So we would not be in conflict with the county if the board chose to,
You chose to make your restrictions more restrictive than the zoning. That's not a conflict.
okay.
But we do not enforce them.
Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Julia, you just been late. Well, just going around the room, and we have our consultant, and basically responding to his questions, and then also, making comments or asking other questions. If you'd like to say something, the microphone is over there by you.
Thank you. Julia Carrera, representing Julia Carrera and Associates, and I deal with a lot of diverse clients that are both existing and new as far as understanding regulation. And I sit in a perplexing situation. I agree with what everybody's said thus far, by the way, where my situation is the question that I get quite often is, if it's an ordinance by law, how do you opt out, and is that even legal? So that's really the question that I'm looking to get an answer for. Thank you.
Great. So, I think that everyone has
We'd like a response.
Yeah.
I'd like to give one. Go ahead.
We haven't gone far down the road of establishing exactly precise approach for opt-out, but zoning is authority that's granted to land use agencies. The county is a land use agency. The right to do something, we would all like to say we have the right to do anything on our property. The reality is we do not. All of us live under various different zoning regulations that allow us to do things or not do things. So legally, we certainly can establish a process for opt-out. Grow cannabis is one of many, many rights that you enjoy or a property owner enjoys on their property. If the county determines that it's in the interest of the greater community to restrict that right, there's certainly ways we can do that. There's many examples of historic districts, for instance, have more stringent requirements and restrictions on how you can modify a structure. So there's many examples of overlays that remove some right or impose some additional standard of review. So I've been working with Kate Cook at Myers-Navi, who's the legal team supporting our efforts within the consultant team, and Kate has no concerns about being able to create the opt-out process. It's more, what do you want it to look like? What's going to be the basis of approving an opt-out? How much is it going to be based on what the specific residents say versus a decision maker? It's the mechanics, but we are confident that there are legal ways that opt-outs can be created. That said, this is a different set of procedures and guidelines than the opt-in. It did arrive as a secondary interest, and what we're discussing with the county is we need to understand, and we need the county to understand candidly that there may be a point where we have to talk about the priorities of getting either exceptions or exemptions or opt-out completed. And so as we work through the details, we'll see how quickly we can move towards getting those regulations. But as far as legally being able to, absolutely, it is. There are legal as for opt-out.
No. Thank you. Ron, you want to add something?
People on the phone.
All right, so let's start with Jude on the phone, and then I'm not sure who else is on the phone, but go ahead, Jude.
Okay, this is Jude Tillman, and I want to add my appreciation for what you're doing here today and some of the comments that people have said already. I especially agree with Hannah's and Paul's comments about smaller groups to create documents that a larger group can then look at, and I'm happy to serve on some of those sub-working committees. I'm especially concerned that as with the work that we've done in the county to regulations, we focus in on cultivation and forget about the other sectors. I just had a meeting with two manufacturers yesterday who are cultivators, and they're applying for microbusiness licenses, and they're in zones where they've been told they can't do cultivation and manufacturing. They're inland, rangeland, and of course we have the coastal issue that is of great concern to me. So I just want to make sure that we're covering all the bases and we're keeping the other sectors in mind as we address these issues. And we do so in a very expeditious manner. It's not just a question of Hannah's well-put add-ons to the 6-month deadline with the state, because there are other things that are pressing upon us as well, including, business plans and how we're proceeding. What can we actually do? What can we plan to do? We can't keep sitting on our hands about this because it jeopardizes our very existence. So just a few agitational words in that regard, and I thank you.
All right, thank you, Jude. Okay, next on the phone, I think you're just going to have to jump in unless
Hi.
Kath.
Hi, this is Penelope. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, who is this?
This is Penelope Andrews calling from Leggett. I'd just like to agree with what Hannah and Casey were saying. I've just asked the Leggett, South Leggett, to be included in the opt-in, and we have had some meetings and we're trying to get organized. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Yes? I'm on the phone.
Janine, I'll take the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate this process. I want to voice that my biggest concern is that the outreach relative to this process is comprehensive enough to reach all of the impacted regions of our very diverse geographic community. I really appreciate the suggestion of utilizing a website and internet-based outreach to assist overcoming the challenges of our geography. I want to voice that I have heard from, in addition to the communities already mentioned, Laytonville, Covelo, I personally live in Comshie, and we've been having farmer meetings here, and we're interested in being involved in the process. Redwood Valley, Anderson Valley, the South Coast area, Leggett, and Willits. And I just want to emphasize that there are a lot of regions that are impacted by this, and I really want to support comprehensive outreach. And I want to also reiterate that we have organized 17 local cannabis organizations that are willing to support outreach through their own personal network to make sure that the outreach is comprehensive. And I also wanted to, speak up to the opt-out and the suggestion to separate into smaller working groups. I support that. I feel that it's a very large undertaking with a lot of moving parts, and I think that's an effective way to move forward. I want to really state my support for communities having a consensus process to come to a sovereign decision about the future of their community. But I do want to say one thing regarding opt-out in terms of the impact of cannabis regulation. I think that there is a tremendous learning curve that we're all undertaking regarding how regulation from all various state agencies, in addition to our local regulation, shapes the impact of commercial cannabis. And so I want to suggest that it probably would be very useful and beneficial that there is at least some crossover with regard to the opt-out groups, that there are members from the cannabis community that have educated ourselves and versed ourselves in how regulation impacts the community in terms of the operations of commercial cannabis. And so I would like to suggest that that would be helpful. to the opt-out groups in order to provide some perspective and guidance on potential impacts and really clarifying how those are taking shape with developing regulations. And with that, I'd like to say thank you, everyone, for coming to the group.
All right, thank you. Here. Do we have anybody else on the phone, Karen?
Yes, this is Susan. Good morning, everybody. I'm representing areas in and around Laytonville and certain areas. Would consultants speak a little further about protocol for overlays and exceptions with regard to 100-year floodplains, particularly as we look at grandfathering in historic, decades-old gardens?
Well, Susan, we haven't, to this point, discussed 100-year floods, so this is very off the cuff. I know that many forms of agricultural cultivation occurred in 100-year floods. My understanding is what we're generally concerned of with flood zones is damaged property. I think that we start talking about commercial cultivation, there may be some environmental sensitivities. If a cultivation site is inundated, what would the negative effects on the surrounding environment be? That might be a consideration, but have really dug into the question of how the overlay and the 100-year flood interact and whether that would even be a criteria. So that's a great item to bring up and work through.
One might just cast a tiny bit more light on that. There's a substantial difference between a seasonal water flow area and a 100-year floodplain. So we're looking at quite a number of farmers, gardeners in the area who have historically farmed in 100-year floodplain areas with diverse gardens, cannabis, grapes, etc. And we're now concerned about what you as the consultant will be doing in terms of working with the water board, again, in terms of overlays and exceptions.
Great input, and we'll put that on the list of items to work through.
Thank you.
Casey?
Finish the phone stuff.
I think that's everyone on the phone except the consultants. Am I right, or did I miss somebody?
Can you hear me? This is Kirk Vodopol.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo some of the other statements by some of the opt-out folks. I live in a residential subdivision with CC&Rs that goes back 50 years almost, and kind of felt like the county, and for that matter, is ignoring the desire to have a residential property in our neighborhood with all the increase in grow density and size. It's really affected our neighborhood. But if an opt-out option is legal and feasible, I don't really understand how the county can issue permits and we still somehow have the authority to say that there's no commercial activity. It just doesn't seem to jive in my mind, and then I really don't see how we'd have the ability to enforce that ourselves. So, yeah, it's pretty confusing, but thanks for including me in the working group.
Okay.
Hello, Kelly here.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I forgot to unmute. This is I've included in my past comments this is to our consultant. Please include the possibility for subdivision in rangeland to be covered by an opt-in overlay zone. Example would be a large ranch off of Cobolo Road that was originally minimum 160 acres, but subdivided into 40-acre parcels in the late 60s. And everyone in the subdivision cultivates and have for generations.
Linda, what's the zoning of that property? Okay. And is cultivation not allowed by right on rangeland? I'm not sure.
Treated in a different way in terms of transferability. and as you probably are getting up to speed on. And it was just a way of to make sure that we are included in rangeland rather than just communities like Leggett or Laytonville or Covelo, because there are other areas that it affects as well.
We'll explore a little bit more the right in rangeland and how the regulations might be limiting long-established cultivation. So we'll take that and want to follow up with you. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
This is Hannah Nelson. I just want to clarify for the last person, Linda, that in fact transferability restrictions are on all commercial permits, so it's not specific to rangeland. And as of last month, the board voted to have staff correct what the board perceived as a mistake made in a zoning chart that treated rangeland differently with respect to requiring an administrative permit, and that is being removed. So I don't think that your issue is particularly an issue anymore, but maybe I'm getting it wrong. And I also want to just add an echo to something that Janine said with respect to having representatives of each area on maybe the subcommittees with each other, because just as with politics and with learning new cultures and other things, I think it's remarkably important, especially if we do want to honor, as I think we all do, to have a non-adversarial process and have it be an educational process and really understand from the different perspectives how things could inadvertently impact somebody else, negatively or positively. I think it's really important that we take a deliberate approach to having, for lack of a better term, mixed groups where there's some input from all sides on the smaller subcommittees. And that's just my personal opinion.
I agree.
Yeah.
I would like to throw out a question in regards to the budget for this process. I recognize that this is going to be an expensive process, and I have grave concerns about the ability to accomplish all of the separate goals without either running over the budget or running out of budget. And as a representative of traditional cultivators, it is my duty to suggest that it is very, very important that these people have the opportunity to participate. And I'm not trying to denigrate or say anything towards opt-out positions, but I think that in terms of the limited budget, and this might be a question for county policymakers, what happens if we run out of budget? How do we prioritize these processes, and how does that work?
So, wait, I want to get a question on what you're asking, Casey. Are you referring to, we obviously have a budget, Nash, we have a budget for the consultant who's doing this. Are you referring to the budget?
Bingo. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I could take a crack at
you. Sure.
Sure.
And I
basically
have thoughts as well.
Edited process. We put in an RFP, and we said this is what we're looking for as far as a product, and we interviewed consultants, and that's the whole process of a competitive bid, is that there's an expectation of what the deliverables are, and then we refine those deliverables and try to live within that budget.
Totally, and more specifically, as this thing grows and we're trying to figure out how to accomplish all of the things, essentially it's very, very important that we get these processes done. And so that's my concern, given the budget, and we're sort of throwing on different things and different possibilities, that perspective of the constituent group that I represent, it is of utmost importance that those people have a pathway to regulated processes.
I'll say that the more we add on to it, the more possibility the consultant's going to come back and say, we are out of scope and we'll need to modify, and that changes the budget.
Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left. So my first question, hold on, Ron, we'll get to you in a second. First question is there anybody on the phone that wanted to speak that did not get to speak? This is your opportunity. Okay, I don't think there is anybody here. So what we have left, this has really been a good discussion, and I hope everybody agrees, and really there are so many different opinions in this room, and you've all done really well to state your opinion, and there has been no character assassination, which I think is really good, so thank you all for that. What I would like to do is go back to our consultant, and you started out with basically saying there were 4 different areas, and I think what we got down to is that we do want to do subcommittees, subgroups, whatever we want to call them, just like we did with state regs, and that works very well. So I would go to the consultant to ask, what are those subgroups that you think, working groups that you think we need to populate here right now? So, Paul?
Clearly, opt-in and opt-out, because they're as related as they are. They're sides of a coin that really, I think, have different constituents, different interests, and different outcomes. The third one is, I think there's some folks who have real good ideas about the exceptions things, where the regs are, strict interpretation of the regs do not allow cultivation, then that's that, where do we want to say a 9.5 acre site actually okay? So those are the 3 areas where I think that most of our working efforts are going to focus.
Okay, so opt-in, opt-out, and exceptions. So let me put the group in here. Was there anything else, any other topic that we needed to form a subgroup on? Everybody's in agreement with those 3. Okay.
I think with the exception, I think you mentioned it on the out, opt-in, you have a mixed blend of people, not just people that want to opt out, right? And then maybe one person that doesn't want to do that. So I think it needs to be a blend of people still, because I think the majority of growers in this room would still probably be not in favor of that, just because of the slippery slope.
Okay, all right, so.
Just a quick comment. I'd like to hear from Paul on what's the recommended size for working groups, because as we figure out who's going to be in them, what's a reasonable size to actually work with the state? 5 people, 7 people.
So Paul, that question is to you.
I would go with 5 to 7. I think that to know it further than that starts to really limit the voices that we get shared. To go bigger than that, it starts to be unwieldy. There's no magic here, but I mean, I can tell that when you get beyond 7, it just becomes more complex. People aren't able to make a meeting. They need to get caught up. The whole process just really slows down as you start moving 8, 10, 11, 12 people. So I think rule of thumb is 5 to 7.
The only comment on that actually came at the table here. Casey reminded us that when we did state requirements, if you start with 4 people and 2 or 3 of them aren't available, you're not going to get far. So I would say that either we look at, if we look at 5 to 7, there has to be a real commitment from the 5 people that they're absolutely going to be on that subgroup and do the work and make the timeline. Because whatever they do has to come back here, and from here it goes to the board. So we are creating some additional steps. The other option is that we blow it out and we say, okay, 10 people, and then we see who shows up. So
I'm going to request that we talk about timeframes first, because I think before people can commit, we got to kind of come up with a schedule. I know, at least in my case, I'm willing to do a lot of extra work, but I'm booked 3 weeks out at a minimum.
Okay, so the purpose of the subgroups, hold on, Julia, please, is that you would be actually working with, and correct me if I'm wrong, those subgroups, you're really going to be working with the consultant. Is that right, Nash? Okay. So that time frame with the consultants, I think, is what's important, right? And
our meetings as well.
Right, in our meetings, but this is getting more complicated than it started. So hold on, Julia, you wanted to say something?
Suggestion, maybe we could unify two alternates, so that if one of the five can't make it, the alternate can step in, the alternate can read notes or listen in, or whatever, so that we're not having the group too large, but we still have someone step in, so we don't end up like, I couldn't do the statement again, so it ended up being 3 people.
I think Julia's point is important. We have a lot of working groups that we do in the county, and it's critical that you attend. And if you don't, the onus is on you to get caught up.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot slow or impede the process, because guess who gets the criticism?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're here to really help you. And if you can't be there, we're trying to work with these consultants. We're trying to listen, but it is difficult. If you're going to put your name in that ring, you have to be committed. And the alternates, I think that that's a very viable solution. They have to also be committed.
And the flip side of it is we've got to schedule them out as far as.
Okay, all right, so we have a lot to do here in the next 10 minutes. You wanted to talk, and then Sarah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that if we have a spectrum of people wanting to opt in and represent that group from different areas, like for me it would be Covelo, I know Casey would be representing Waynesville. There's other areas too, Leggett, like how do we facilitate that beyond, keep that within the.
All right, okay, Sarah?
It's 2 points. One, I would suggest that the neighbors per year really limit how much you need. If you want to make sure you take people's time seriously, let's schedule out these subcommittees and then really only meet here when we actually all have work products so we don't end up in a gazillion meetings. And then on the, I also think while it's really great and we love to do an overlay all over the place, we have to get one done, so I think it would be really great if we pick 2 or 3, see how it works, and then move from there, because if we have to do like 8 overlays, you know, we've got to get one done. So I would suggest, you know, as we talk about it, let's really focus on the beginning portion.
Okay, so in the interest of time and really wanting to get this done, there's 2 ways we could approach it. We know we have 3 groups, have to back into a time frame, but also do we just limit that to this group right now, everybody throw in your hat for which group you want. My preference would be to have Cass send something out and have you all submit your name as to which group you want to be in, either the opt-in, opt-out, or exception. Do you find that acceptable?
And in general, let's touch base amongst ourselves and
yes,
you know, so that we don't
collaborate.
Collaborate so that you're not overlapping and duplicating efforts.
Okay, and then the other point that Chris brought up, and as far as, so say for opt-in, we want somebody who is supporting opt-out to be on that committee as well. For opt-out, the same thing. Does everyone agree on that concept? I think it's a democratic process, and I like that concept. I'm just want to make sure everybody's in agreement. Did I capture that, Chris, or did I get it right?
And I would also say, let's make sure that the deck doesn't get stacked one way or the other. If you're going to go with 5 people, let's don't have 3 people from Woody Glen, 4 people from Woody Glen, and 1 person, you know, us. And then that is going to be an adversarial relationship. So I think you're going to have to be really careful about it. Obviously, Eric, Sue are going to submit your names. You're going to submit your names to be for the opt-out. Obviously, Anne Marie and I are going to be not in favor of that, right? So we don't want it to be a feud between 3 or 4 neighbors on that work group. I think that'll be a disaster.
Because there are other neighborhoods that
But as
there are.
said, so I would suggest that the Woody Glen group, you get together and you say, okay, which one of us, or which 2 of us, or which, you know, so that you do have that representation. But again, there's Deerwood, there's also, you know, we don't, you're exactly right, we don't want to stack the deck, so to speak, that it becomes.
And there's a point about, you know, sometimes you have to have a quick win, and if we try to capture every single neighborhood right now, we're not going to get it done. So let's go look at that. So what we'll do is Cass will send, today's Thursday, so no later than Monday, Cass will send something out to this group delineating the three working groups and asking for volunteers for those 3 working groups. we will look at 5 to 7 people. You know, I've just known what it takes to get something done. 5 people is really good to get something done. I do agree, though, if those 5 people don't show up, you get nothing done.
Yeah,
So we'll look at 5 to 7 people. Okay, those 3 working groups. We will confer with our consultant, Paul, as to not only the makeup but the time frame. So with that time frame, Nash, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts on when is the end product, that far out date, that end product going to the board?
I would agree with Sarah. We limit it to a couple of areas because the more areas we look at, the further out it goes. Keep in mind that it is a zoning issue. It's a legislative act. It's an overlay zone. Therefore, it's going to have to go to the Planning Commission. It's going to have to go to the Board of Supervisors. There's an ordinance. There's a map change and so on. And that's going to take some time. And typically with any zone change, or ordinance, you're looking at about a 6-month time period. But here, you know, we understand that there's some urgency to these, and a lot of it is going to come back to how much time goes into, I'll say, brainstorming with the groups. Because the more the groups get together and add to this, the longer it's going to go out. I mean, we could give the consultant a target and say, okay, meet this, but the more he has to confer with everybody, the longer it's going to take. So with that, I'm going to say, you know, a typical ordinance amendment and a rezone is 6 months. We are in new territory, so and ask Paul, you know, do you see anything different here?
Okay, so hold on, Ron, please. Paul, we're looking at a 6-month time frame. Do you have any comments on that? And that 6-month time frame is, okay, that 6-month time frame includes getting our work done, getting it with you, getting it to the Planning Commission, and getting it to the board. That is all included in those 6 months. And Paul, you're saying it's optimistic.
No, it's not optimistic. It's unrealistic. Nash described that it's about 6 months usually to go through a process of a rezone. If we had the regulations in place and had the overlay understood and we just needed to go out and work with the communities and then implement it, I think that's a process that, you know, with things and board, we could probably pull that off if we wanted to move fast in a little under 4 months. But a situation where we don't even understand what the regulations are. A typical zoning code change to craft the kind of complex regulations we're looking at is similar. You know, if you're moving fast, it's a 3 or 4 month process. So now we're trying to both write the regulations and simultaneously apply them, and then get to hearings where you both adopt the regulations and do the hearings on the overlays. This month's just, I really don't think it's realistic. We can move very quickly, but that's a lot to take on in a very short time frame. That the last 2 months are hearings, so you know we would have to have all of our work done writing the overlay regulations within 2 months. Could we do that? Yeah, possibly. It's just very optimistic, and it really depends a lot on how quickly the representatives of the committees, both in favor of cultivation and concerned about cultivation, can really get to workable solutions that meet their needs and are legally defensible and can be implemented. So this is not rocket science, but this is relatively complex zoning that we're dealing with.
Okay, so Paul, I know what you're saying, and I appreciate you as our subject matter expert, and you could be 100% right. I think we're going to back into a time frame of 6 months. So
okay, that's not the first time I've heard that.
Okay, Ron, go ahead. You've been trying to say something.
Yeah, I think there are some serious issues of timeline as far as the county regulations to bring in new cultivators, existing cultivators in these areas. For the opt-out, if we're looking at a 6-month period, I don't see how we take the urgency on the opt-in, because we're talking permits, we're talking timelines that are set in the ordinance. That is something that I think would be quick. Opt-out is, if 6 months minimum, we're into the cultivation time with people that are already there. And I don't see how we can speed that process up, but we've got a county ordinance that says if people aren't in within June, they won't be able to get in. So if we can do the overlay, how do they?
Does anyone want to speak to that? Or?
I mean, that urgency is very apparent within the community, and we are, we have the time.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to send something out either tomorrow or Monday at the latest. We'll populate the groups and lead those groups to get together as quickly as possible and start working. And Paul, the expectation with you will be that you will be working with those groups, and I know that you know that, and when you signed on, you knew we were doing this. So we will just move as quickly as we can, but still being very careful that we don't create something that we know will never fly. And it's kind of like when you throw a hat in the ring to campaign for something, you want to make sure that you're electable, right? You could have the best person, not electable, do nothing.
And our attorneys are going to have to review all of that. That's, a dozen people.
Attorneys can review whatever they want.
Well, they have to so that we can file if we have to.
And that's absolutely, that's absolutely fine. You could have 50 attorneys come in and review something.
Right.
The fact is that, I've been in government over 20 years, and it takes a hell of a lot to get something done.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying.
Very, very close to actually putting together a process that could benefit you, could benefit Aaron, could benefit everyone, including the county and our 90,000 people out there. So your attorneys reviewing whatever they want will not be part of this process, though, right?
Well, they're part of the process because
they're part of your process.
Right. Yeah.
Okay? They can review anything.
Right.
But right now, what we're really trying to do is just make some progress.
Right.
For your benefit, for all of our benefit.
Correct.
So,
one of the thought of that is that maybe on those committees, there's a lot of ways to do it, but if you have 3 or 4 people for opting out, 1 or 2 for opting in, why don't we just have 1 person for opting out, 1 person for opting in, and then the other 3 to 5 people have nothing to do with it, like a jury trial. Because if you have prejudices from both sides, it's going to be very difficult to get a really good, honest, objective goal.
So, Chris, very good point, and everything is being taped. We can go back and listen to your points. I've liked everything you've said here today. Okay. What I want to see is we're going to get this out. We're going to populate the group. We're going to work with the consultants. You're going to consultants that are going to work to get you scheduled, and we're going to do everything we can to get as much information within the next 60 days that Paul, that you could agree to as part of this process to put this together. And I think that is the best we can do today. And I don't know about anybody else here, but I'm still hopeful. I've seen counties work together that takes, again, a lot of effort to get 6 counties to work together on something and come out with something in a time frame. Currently working with 4 counties right now to put something together for next week. It can happen, and you all are you're more invested and committed in this room than I've seen in other topics and areas. So I trust that we're going to get this done. Okay?
Can I just add one thing, too, on behalf of our consultant who's sitting here? A lot of what we're talking about was not necessarily initially a part of our discussion. So there's also community meetings. There's more than just sitting at this table. I have to put that out there because not only is Paul and his group going to be working with you, there's a lot more to this. So I just have to throw that out there so we are all very realistic.
So, and thank you for that reminder, Aaron. I want to say one thing before I go to you. And that is that will be part, it will be, with all due respect to everybody in here, including myself, Nash, the consultants, the Board of Supervisors, it is the county that's responsible to actually this time frame hiring somebody to do this and getting this done. We have to hold ourselves accountable here. And so there's a time frame being thrown out. Whether we like it or not, we're going to do everything we can to work as quickly as we can to get this done. We know that when it's come to cannabis, this has been a long process, really, I think over the last 3 years. So, Aaron, please.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. So the makeup of the group for the opt-out, I understand the comments that were made. Does that also apply to the other two groups for the makeup?
Yeah, I think we have to be here.
I agree. That's going to bog down potentially the process.
Let's hope not. Let's, we're going to have to, well, these groups really, these subgroups are your subgroups, we're going to track them and work with you to assist you to get this done. But let's just go ahead and develop the subgroups, work with the consultant, and get as far as we can. So as far as scheduling another overall meeting of this group, what I would like to do is schedule these first. And then once we do that, then I want to send out an email to everyone so you will know who's on each of the 3 subgroups and when they will be meeting. And then we will ask for a report back. And I think those subgroups within 30 days, working with the consultant, could report back to this overall group. So, Paul, can you agree to that?
Yeah, Carmel, I'd like to make sure that I've heard it from others that we're all busy, and I'd like to be programming a little bit out. It's also very important for us at times to be in the room with you folks. We might get a lot out of these conversations, but in order to really do all this work, we're going to have some face-to-face time. So as well as talking about the regular meetings, I'd like to start programming out when Mark and I will actually be in town and can schedule a series of working group meetings. Us getting there is a lot of effort. So once we're there, we're fine to spend a day or two in working with lots of folks, maybe going to a community, maybe working with a subgroup, maybe an overall meeting. So, as far as scheduling, it's we want to be thinking, not just about this working group, but get out there on the horizon so we can make sure that everybody's aware of key get-togethers and we can keep moving quickly. So I'd like to talk about the regular date for this meeting, but also keep in mind that we have that better scheduling issue. And we are interested in coming and visiting the county on, as I mentioned earlier, the 19th, the 24th, or the 26th. Any of those would be good days that Mark and I can be in the county to work with you.
The 24th, that's state traffic.
So, looking at where, Paul, if you heard that, we think
Back in Trace is the 24th. Yeah.
So are you looking at 3 days, or are you looking at picking one of those dates?
Pick one of them.
So 19th to the 26th, all right? 26th. The 26th. It sounds like we have a movement for the 26th in here. Can you do the 26th?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Calendar that. 6 all day.
On the 26th, we're going to anticipate probably a full group meeting, plus also scheduling some subgroup focus meetings. To kind of put you on notice, we'll okay.
Is that the 26th of January?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what we're going to need to do is probably phone conference with you much after this, and not at 12:30, not right now because we have another group in 30 minutes. But we're going to have to phone conference soon, just to regroup what we did today, what was discussed, what the goals are, and our time frame. So thank you very much. In the interest of time, it is 12:30. This group is over, and you all know, those of you that are coming back at 1 o'clock, what's next? 1:30. Oh, great, we get a lunch break. Okay, so 1:30. I want to thank you all. I know it's been challenging for everyone, including our consultant, who's trying to do everything he can to work through this with us.
Thank you, Paul, and everybody.
All right, so you'll get something from Cass within the next couple of days, and we'll go from there, okay? Thank you all.